Welcome, everybody, to our Executive Council meeting of February 29th. We have regrets from Councillor D'Entremont, and we have Councillor Digdon online as well, who has joined us. On the agenda, we have the invitation to stand and move as always. It is always there. Number 3, approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any additions for the agenda? Okay, seeing none, the agenda stands approved as presented. Any conflicts of interest with any points on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, know that you can declare conflict at any time. Next, number 4, we have a presentation from Grant Thornton Auditors. Yeah, press the mic.
Excellent, thank you very much. So I am going to present the consolidated financial statements for March 31st, 2023. And so I can tell you that I've already met with your audit committee and we've gone through the statement in detail, as well as our report to the audit committee on the process for the audit as well. So I'm only going to do high level, but please feel free to ask questions if you have any. So the consolidated financial statements take into consideration all of the operations of the municipality. So your operating fund, your capital reserve, and your operating reserve. But then it also brings in your proportionate share of the what we call controlled entities. So you are involved in the operations of several other organizations and you share the control of those with the Municipality of Yarmouth and the Town of Yarmouth. So those are the Yarmouth Area Industrial Commission, the Yarmouth International Airport Corporation, YASTA, Yarmouth County Solid Waste Management Authority, and new this year, the Mariner Center Management Authority. So in these financial statements, you pick up your proportionate share of their revenues and their expenses, as well as their assets and their liabilities. That's why it's called consolidated, because we've got all of the operations added together. I'm going to start on page 1, which is the Independent Auditor's Report. So this is our letter to you, and this is our audit opinion. So it is a clean audit opinion. We did not find anything while we did our audit that would cause us to have to modify our report, limit our scope, or have to make any other commentary associated with it. And so our actual official opinion is the second little paragraph, that the accompanying consolidated financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the Municipality of the District of Argyle as at March 31st, 2023, and the results of its operations and its cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with Canadian Public Sector Accounting Standards, which is the framework that you fall under. We also have the next paragraph, which is the basis for our opinion. So we have to follow auditing standards when we plan and implement our audit. The next section is on the responsibilities of management and those charged with governance. So it is management's responsibility to set a system of internal controls that accumulates the financial information throughout the year. As well, their goal is to make sure that your financial statements are free of error. Management also has to do what we call a lookout test, and that's to make sure that you have enough assets to realize your liabilities in the next 12 months. It's called a going concern test. And then those charged with governance, which was your audit committee and ultimately you as council, is for the oversight of management's processes. So not day to day, but high level, are you comfortable that management has got the right processes in place? On page 2, this is all about the auditors in terms of the audit work that we do. We have a main objective, and that is to obtain what we call reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free of material misstatement. While reasonable assurance is a high level of assurance, it's not a 100% guarantee that there might not still be an error in the financial statements. But what we do is the next section, these are all the things that we do to make sure that risk is as low as we can make it. So we identify the areas of highest risk and we spend more audit time in those areas. We do audit all material balances, but we spend more time in the areas of highest risk. We have to understand how your internal control systems work. We don't audit them, but we do have to understand how they operate. And then we evaluate your accounting policies to make sure they're in accordance with public sector accounting standards and that you are following them. And then we also have to conclude on whether or not we agree with management's assessment of that going concern, which we do. We evaluate the overall presentation, so not just the financial information, but all the notes at the back as well. And then because they are consolidated statements, we have to make sure that there is appropriate levels of audit work done on each one of those controlled entities as well. And then we have this communication with you. Hopefully to be dated today, if you approve the statements when we're done. Page 3 is management's responsibility for financial reporting. So under public sector accounting standards, your management team is required to, in writing, take responsibility for the financial statements. And this page just walks through their responsibility and what they do throughout the year. So page 4 is the consolidated statement of operations. And so these are your revenues and your expenditures for the year. So they tell the story of how well the year went. You can see there's a budget, an actual for 2023 and an actual for 2022. In total, your revenues were set to budget at $11,774,870, and your actuals are $11,535,539, and the actuals for the prior year were $8,985,717. So some of the reasons for the increase over the prior year are tax assessments went up. Your tax rates remain consistent, but you would have seen a bump from continual increase in those assessments over the year. As well, you brought in your share of the revenues from the Mariner Center this year, which is new. You also spent a significant amount of your Canadian Community Building Fund, so formerly called gas tax. So what happens with your gas tax is as you get the money, you put it aside, and when you spend it on a project, it becomes revenue. So this year you did 2 or 3 projects during the year. The biggest one was your commitment to the rural internet program. So you would have used money, becomes revenue, to pay for that. As well, you'll see a significant increase in your interest. So you have money that you have received that you're going to spend in the future. It's sitting in an interest-bearing account, and the interest rates over the prior year and the year before actually have been very strong. So you can see that you have a significant bump from the prior year in your interest revenue. And then again, you see 2 more categories for the operations that came in from the Mariner Center. Those are your total revenues. On the expenditure side, you had set your budget at $10,765,793. You came in at $10,587,973, and your actual last year was $8,356,082. So your expenses are up significantly as well, but not as much as your revenue is up. Again, of the $2.2 million in the increase in your expenses, $800,000 is from the operations of the Mariner Center, $600,000 you spent on the rural internet, as well as a few other projects. There were some salary increases in all of your departments, so we see a cost of living increase for those types of things. And so generally speaking, your protective services, your policing contract is a little bit higher than the prior year as well. But in total, you are under your budget from an expense perspective, a little over $170,000, which is only about 1%, and you were over your revenue budget by $239,000, about 2%. So what that translated into, your annual surplus before unusual items, you had budgeted $1,009,000, and you came in at $947,000. That's very close on a consolidated basis to bring in all of those entities together to come that close to your budget, and up over the prior year net of $317,000. Another unusual item, you can see a gain on change in proportionate controlled entity. So when you bought in or became part of the agreement with the other 2 municipalities for the Mariner Center, the agreement was that you became 1/3 owner in the property, and so that means you got to pick up your 1/3 interest in their net assets, so the capital assets, all of their other assets less their liabilities. That value was $2,050,295. Basically, you paid $1 and you got $2 million worth of value of being now an owner in that entity, and that's existing assets at the time, which was April 1st of 2023. Okay? And then you have what we call a gain or disposal of an asset. So you did sell your old municipal building, and you sold it for more than it was recorded on the books, the net book value. So you have a gain of $197,000 there. So your annual surplus this year is $3,195,146, is significantly inflated because of that one-time pickup that you have from the Mariner Center. And so next year you wouldn't expect to see the same dollar value. But we started the year with an accumulated surplus of $22,342,000. You bring in the $3.1 million in your annual surplus for this year, and you end the year at $25,537,000 in what we would call book value of your organization. Those are the revenues and expenditures. On page 5 is the consolidated statement of financial position. So these are your assets and your liabilities. The top half are always your financial assets. Those are the assets that are readily convertible to cash. And you can see at the top, your cash position in the unrestricted category has grown over the prior year. There's a couple of things there, and we see it also in your deferred revenue number, which is significantly higher this year, is that you did receive $2 million for the future capital of your track and field. So you hadn't spent it by March 31st of 2023, so it sits in deferred revenue. As well, with your 1/3 pickup of the Mariner Center, they had their contribution for the future expansion of their project. The provincial money had actually already been given to them, so you pick up a portion of that revenue, or that asset base as well. So that's basically the reason why your cash balance has grown over the prior year. The rest of your assets, your net financial assets, are fairly consistent year over year. The one item that is a bit up is what we call due from federal government and its agencies, is basically your HST. So you did do several capital projects this year, so your portion of the HST that you would have spent on those projects, which is due back to you, is sitting as a receivable at the end of the year. So your total financial assets this year are $16,107,000. On your financial liability side, I'll just talk about the things that are a little bit different. You can see the deferred revenue. Last year it was $1,813,000. This year it's $4,616,000. So it is quite a bit higher. And so I already mentioned that the money that you got for the track and field is $2 million sitting in that account to be spent in the future when you undertake your project. $1.3 million from the Mariner Center. As well, right close to the end of the year last year, the government of Nova Scotia gave you $475,000 under the Sustainable Services Growth Fund. So you hadn't spent any of that by the end of the year. So those are the three big things that are sitting in your deferred revenue. The next item that's new this year is the asset retirement obligation. So this is a new section that came out under the public sector accounting standards that had to be implemented in the fiscal March 31st, 2023 year. And you can see that the liability is $547,000. So that's a portion comes from the municipality, but then there's also a portion from the Solid Waste Management Authority. There's a portion from the airport. There's a portion from the Industrial Commission. Each one of them had a piece of that liability had to be recorded on their books. And so throughout the project, each of your subsidiaries, they hired a company called AIM Network, and they did the calculations of those liabilities. So today's value is $547,000, but into the future, as that liability has to be paid, some of them are actual liabilities that you know the date of when you're going to pay for them. Like in the case of the municipality, you know at some point in time the windmill's going to have to come down. So they're out into the future. So the future liability associated with this $547,000 is about $2.2 million. So that's what it will be in the future, because today's value, of course, is discounted for today's value. In the future, it will take more dollars to pay for. Then the other large item there is your long-term debt. So there was no new debt during the year. The subsidiaries, none of them have any external debt. This is all the municipalities, and most of it is for this new building, and it'll be paid off into the future. So the only change this year is the actual repayment that you made of principal payments this year.
What's on that retirement, asset retirement? When you say future, wouldn't that be a number for future? Like I could say the future people who live to retire. Like, is there a given time?
Each one of them have their own time frame. So in the note, you would see it's anywhere between 1 and 38 years. So like the wind turbine might be 20 years, but some of the buildings, if it has asbestos in it, only on the date that you might tear it down, that could be 50 years from now. So they each have a different timeline associated with them. Yep. Yep. Thank you for the question. So your total liabilities are $9,873,000. So you have a very strong net financial asset position of $6,234,000. It's grown over the prior year by $594,000. Then what we call non-financial assets, so that's all the equipment, the buildings of you and all of those subsidiaries, is $19,243,000. And that's the amortized value, the original cost was $33 million. Obviously, that's not replacement value. That number would be significantly higher if you had to record your replacement value, but that was the original cost. Amortization realizes that those decline over time, and for accounting purposes, we depreciate them as they go. So that's what you've invested in your community. That's all the things that have been purchased that allow you to be able to provide all the services to your residents in your community. So that is what you've committed and spent in your community. So in total, your accumulated surplus is $25,537,000. So those are the two most important pages. As I said, I've already gone through the notes and the schedules at the back with your audit committee, but if you had any other questions.
Are there any other questions for Gloria? Okay, seeing none, are we comfortable accepting these statements? If we're comfortable, is there somebody willing to make a motion to do so? Okay, so it's moved by Councillor Bourque, seconded by Councillor Sonia. Any other questions on that? Seeing, did this go dead? Hold on, sorry. Councillor Surratt.
So this has been approved by the
Yes.
audit committee?
It was. It was recommended that we accept it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The audit committee can't approve, they can only make recommendations.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, motion carried. Thank you. Next, we have number 5, the adoption of the minutes. February 8th, 2024. Regular council meeting minutes. I'm sure you've had a chance to look at them. Any errors or omissions? Okay, seeing none, the minutes stand approved as presented. Number 6, staff reports. 6A, we have a department head report. There are 2 separate ones. There's active and completed. I don't know about the rest of council, but for me, this was a really good way of looking at what is going on in our municipality. But also, I like the completed one because when everything is all together, I find it's kind of hard to determine. I did like the separation myself. Any questions or comments for any staff members here on these reports? Okay, seeing none, we will look at the clerk's report is also there. There's an attachment. This one is mostly salmon colored. A few white spots, but it's, again, shows the progression. Shows, for us, it's a good visual of everything that's happening. Questions or comments? Okay, next report is the building permit report, which is usually, sent to us for us to have an idea. I don't know about the rest of you, but I always look to see what's going on in my own district. It's kind of what I do.
You got it.
Any questions or comments on that one? Okay, seeing none, we will continue on. Number 7, 7-day notice. Article C22, fees and penalties amendments. So we have council policy in front of us for fees and penalties. There's a few amendments. One of them I noticed was we approved the room levy not long ago, a few meetings ago. So that is included in this, but the big part is at the very end, Appendix C. Did you want to speak to that? Okay. Schedule C is there's a big addition there, council chambers room rental. So there are fees associated to some groups if they want to rent this room throughout the day. So there are fees included, with or without IT service, with or without coffee and water, just the room fees, it's included. So this is your 7-day notice. It'll be on our next agenda. Any questions or comments for that? Okay, seeing none, I gotta go back to we will move on to number 8 for decision and discussion. A is done, so we'll go to B. Streetlight request. Highway 3 and Camp Cove Wharf Road intersection. Counselor Donaldson.
Yes, I had
Go ahead.
I had a phone call from the household that lives right next to the Wharf Road. And Camp Cove Wharf, there's no place to turn around, so they have to back the whole way down from Route 3, the whole way down the Wharf Road. And it's a tight 90-degree turn to get going. And the household owner said most nights, especially after dark, the trucks have a hard job getting lined up and get going down. So they was wondering if it's possible to have a street light where it's an intersection danger situation. I thought I'd bring it up. So I don't know where it goes from here.
I'm assuming we'd have to check our policy. Go ahead, CAO.
Yep, we will take that request right through the policy. We'll make you work it right through the garden. And typically, it's safe. Typically, positive answers are because of safety issues. So we'll deal with the resident in question and get the proper forms, and we'll put an application in, and
Okay.
if it meets the
I will add to
guidelines.
it, when they did do the repaving through Argyle on Route 3 a few years ago, they did widen that road a little bit, so it does make it a bit easier.
Right.
And some of it might be driver experience too, but I know I could whip down there, no problem. Just joking. But
We'll
no,
make-
it is a tight back, and when you're on the main highway trying to get down, then you have to navigate the whole Wharf Road once you do get lined up, so.
We'll get the information from that resident from you, and we'll start the ball rolling, and then the completed application, if it requires council approval, will be brought here. It doesn't always.
Okay.
It depends on the situation. Safety is always the number one measure, and we usually look at it independently, because everybody feels that it's unsafe when there's no light, right? So there has to be actually a little bit more evidence to support that claim. We go through it, and if council requires an approval on the policy, we'll bring it to you. So we'll just get that, and we'll deal with it probably at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Number 8C, windmill revenue. That was a request from Councillor Saulnier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've put together a short introduction to the future revenue coming from the windmills. It's kind of a small proposal, or a proposal to say the least. So it's short, and I'll read it to you. The Municipality of Argyle will be adding $700,000 annually to its coffers through tax revenue from the wind farm project. Our administration is always hard at work budgeting our finances to meet the challenges of our communities. This new income source will bring much anticipated relief to our municipality, and also brings us to a crossroad, which will give us the opportunity to explore the direction and management of these funds. I propose that this new revenue generated by the windmills be directed and invested towards further serving our Argyle communities, allowing us to be mindful and more ambitious towards the needs and interests of our residents. I would respectfully ask our CAO, through a motion of council, to put together models of what this new budgeting idea would look like. I would further add that I just took the lead with this because these windmills are in my district, District 2, so I felt comfortable in taking the lead. But that's as far as I will go, because this money, unlike the community money, is meant for the entirety of Argyle. The community money is meant for District 2 and 3, but not this. So I would welcome debate. I also, before I do that, I would also say that Alain Scott are quite aware of this proposal. And if there's any questions coming from this, would probably be best directed to Alain, because he would be the numbers cruncher. He's good at what he does, and he knows all about this. So it's a proposal for a motion to look at this, to make models, and to see what this would look like. Thank you.
Thank you. We are going to get an unprecedented amount of income every single year.
Yeah.
And as we mentioned at one of our meetings, it can potentially be a game changer for us. And we have to, I agree with, we have to be careful as to what we do with this money. And I understand what you're saying. We do a lot of projects within our municipality as it is, but you want to make sure that that's what I'm hearing, is that you want to make sure that this money is serving our communities, all of our communities, not just yours, but all of our communities in our municipality.
Correct. I get a lot from people, what's in it for us type thing. And we do a lot, we spend a lot, we do a lot for the community, and we put a lot of money outside of community that is well serving to our community. However, I think people are looking within a little more. And again, I've talked to Alain about this, and he's well aware, and he's got great ideas, and if anybody can crunch those numbers, he can. Yeah.
Great. Any other comments on this? Anybody want to, this is up for, I think his purpose was for discussion, debate. Any other comments? Counselor Bourque.
This is just a comment. I agree with Ted, Councillor Saulnier. I like to see this money stay within our municipality, because we do spend a lot of money outside of our municipality, which you had said, that serves our municipality as well. But something that they can see that's going to benefit them, because right now, $700,000 every year, we can do a lot with that. And if we can improve our municipality, maybe even generate more revenue with that 700,000. That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Surratt?
Councillor Sonia, I think it's a great idea. I think that staff has certainly knows a lot of where the money is being spent and where it could be spent. They see a lot of probably people asking for different items, or they see different needs, where maybe I wouldn't see the whole picture more or less in my district. I do see things, but I think it'd be a great discussion, and I think staff should bring us a list of stuff that they see to council, so we can make decisions to guide. I think that's the proper way to do it. If you make that a motion, I'll certainly second that, for sure.
We have, in the past, we do have a capital plan, but in the past, we've looked at all of our projects. I remember we've done that. We put posters up on the wall just to that was before Councillor Boudreau and Councillor Sonia's time, where we would look at every possibility, and what do we call it, dot something, that we were putting dots on what we were
Green and red.
prioritizing. But we only had, not that we only had a certain amount of money, but this is going to be more money, right? We're looking at potentially making newer changes within our municipality, so. Councillor Sonia?
Thank you. I will certainly make a motion to that. I look at this, I don't think there's any secret out there what every councillor wants. Everybody knows what I look for and what Guy looks for. We're pretty well set in what this community is, what the communities do want. So I don't think it's very hard. And so I'd like to make a motion to, at the very least, get Alain to crunch these numbers, like I said, and give us some models to see how this would come together and what's the best way to handle this. And then we can move from there.
Could I say something? It's already on.
Yes, yes.
Would it be prudent?
Can we get a seconder first?
Oh, I second.
Okay, go ahead. Now go ahead.
Thank you. Would it be prudent to also, and I've just thrown this out there, maybe take a lump sum of that money, and I'm not saying like 600,000, but I'm saying maybe, 100,000, and put it in some kind of a kitty, some money in aside for, not spend it all, 705,000 or whatever it is every year to the penny. Should that be put aside for maybe a project? And maybe Alain can bring that up, or Scott, bring that to us, saying there's a project down the road in 5 years. So instead of going every year the whole amount, something we could look at. I'm not saying it's a done deal, but think about that. Yeah.
CAO Muse?
First of all, I appreciate that the word kitty was used in reference to putting money aside. That's, I also accept piggy bank and other such. It's very 1999. I appreciate that, Counselor.
Look, Councilor Digdon has his piggy bank
Oh,
out.
see, I find that also interesting that he has one close enough that he could grab it. So that's interesting. We're learning a lot today. I'm going to say that first of all, what the motion in question is certainly something that we were thinking about doing even before the 700 came around. So here's how I would describe Argyle 2 years ago, and here's how I would describe Argyle or where it's about to go in the next couple of months. 2 years ago, everything was, I shouldn't say everything, many things were a reaction. So we had a list of capital. There are things we had to do, okay? And then so that usually goes against what's politically popular, right? I mean, nobody stands up and puts their hand up for a replacement of a sewer lateral, though they would be the first to complain if it stopped working. So some things that we have on our capital list are must-dos, and we do have things that would be nice to do in terms of actually enhancing the community, not just, look, changing a lateral enhances a community, but it's invisible, right? So we have had projects in the past like Glenwood Park and you know, the track and field and others, I could go on, that enhance the community that people use that asset. But what we don't have is a plan of action, especially for the additional money we're expecting and how we're to allocate that over time. So what Councillor Saulnier is suggesting can be done through what we call a capital reserve policy. And what that capital reserve policy basically says is, okay, ladies and gentlemen of council, of elected officials, this amount of money will be transferred, shall be transferred to the capital reserve per year. So it will define what that number might be. Now, it's a policy, so it can change. So, you know, to your point around keeping it kitty, maybe some of it goes to one place and some of it goes to another place. Maybe your intentions are to spend $500,000 a year on Argyle-related projects. So for us as staff, we want to be very clear about what that means, right? Because there's things that are for Argylers, and I don't mean the community, I mean the municipality, and there are things that are in Argyle. There's two different things sometimes. Also, what I'm hearing from this group is that what you're really looking for is capital. You're not necessarily looking for operating, though that money can be used to offset operating costs. So I've used this as an example before. You could put $100,000 aside and that would be used to pay down the debt for the Mariner Center. Okay, that's an example. That would stay within the operational confines. It wouldn't necessarily, it wouldn't add more capital projects. But what you could also do is to say the remaining will go to the reserve, and from a list, we will select certain types of projects that we will fund. So that list is defined by you. The other thing that was, so 2 years ago, like I said, we're very reactionary. If we get the money, we got it last minute, oh my God, we got to go do the project. Sometimes the project's not ready and so the projects have accelerated, probably fivefold. There's 5 times more projects going on now than there ever was. And there's also more money out there for those projects. So it's not just the money that we're looking at with the wind turbines, it might be other grant money that could accelerate projects. So we want to be careful not to paint yourself too far in a corner, but allow you the flexibility to use this money in the purpose that you serve best. We will do our best to provide a variety of examples of what projects could qualify. At the end of the day, it's up to you to tell us whether it works for you or not, because you are elected. It is your money to spend the way that you wish. We, as staff, are going to push you because we run a business, right? You work on the business, we work in the business. We run a business, and so we know there's certain things that have to be replaced, right? The pump needs to be replaced and all these things. So certainly, over the next month, my plan was to have a meeting similar to the dot monkey that Councillor Sudet called it. I called it dotmocracy and survey monkey, and he married them, and now it's dot monkey, and that cannot be undone. So it's going to be dot monkey, and we could do some priority setting around projects. Also understanding that there are certain projects we can't change. Like you're not going to look at the list and go, well, we're not going to do the Mariner Center. Well, we're we're 25% in it. Like, we've got it fully funded. Of course, we're gonna do it. So some of those, I think we would take and just celebrate the fact that we're doing. And then the rest of them, we're gonna take a look at them. And and without being political, I mean, I know that many of the conversations that I might have with you guys involve streetlights and multi-purpose paths. Those are two things that I think your community continuously says, well, when's this gonna happen? And the answer is always, okay, we have to take one step at a time, which we'll get into a little further in the agenda. There is information for you. That was a long story. We're happy to do the capital reserve. We think we'll do it through a policy. We will present you various options to select from, and we'll try to marry that with looking at our long-term capital plan, which will happen the next month. So you'll have the benefit of seeing all the projects, talking about new projects that could be added or deleted, and then we would take the policy and line them all up. And that will set you up, I hope, for a better planning for the next 10 years.
Sounds like a good plan. Warden Muse?
Yeah, I think Alette covered a couple of the questions that I had, especially when we were talking about the Mariner Center and that the tax rate would probably have to go up. We have always talked about that. But it seemed like lately, since we've known about the Westport project, that maybe we won't have to raise the tax. And that serves every member of the community, right? And I would have a problem, I think, with saying we're going to set ourselves in a situation where we have to put this money aside into, because we never know. It's part of our revenue, yearly revenue, and there's some years that maybe we're going to need that revenue to do something else. And I would have a bit of a problem to say it has to be done this way. I would say it's done this way when we can do it, and probably most years we would be able to. But it's just, that would be my biggest concern, right? And I think you covered that in your explanation as well, that sometimes we may have to say, well, it's going to go here or whatever, that, even, we might say it has to be capital, but it may not always be possible to do it every year. And I would caution against saying this is what needs to be done with that money. That's the only thing.
Thank you. I think it's important, though, to come up with a plan and to come up with a policy, because it feels like it's a big purse of money, and we want to make sure that we are spending it effectively, right? Because it's a lot more money. And in the meantime, if we're able to get some of our wish lists that we've been thinking about for a while, I mean, we can't do everything all at once, but if we're able to tick off some of those things, that would be fantastic. So thank you for bringing that up, and you have what you needed?
There's only the motion to
Yep.
be voted on.
You're good, okay? So any other questions or comments? Oh, sorry, Councillor Surratt?
That money will be starting to flow 2025 or 26?
That's an excellent question. It will not be 25. We have time. That's the good news. Well, I mean, better news would be that we'd be paid yesterday, but the good news is we've got about 2 years from the end of development, and then once they're completed, the money, the taxation will occur at that time. So I wouldn't expect anything for the next 24 months. But into that coming year, you might see something, and it may be prorated. It may not be the full 700 for that year.
Right. Okay. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. Next, we have 8D, low-income property tax exemption amounts for 2024. So we've had a conversation about this. There was an attachment. On the attachment, tax exemption applications for 2023 and how much money that cost us as a municipality. So the thresholds are listed there. We discussed changing the thresholds this year for the upcoming tax year. So there's a couple of options there. So proposal 1 has total household income of $0 to $28,000. The tax exemption would be $300. If it is $28,001, between that and $56,000, it would be an exemption of $200. Or proposal number 2, because we asked Marcia to bring us more than one proposal, would be $0 to $28,000 would be $300 tax exemption. $28,001 to $55,999 would be a $200 tax exemption. And then we added in the $56,000, so if there was $56,000 to $63,499 in income, total household income, they could apply for a $100 tax exemption. So we have the ability tonight to decide on one of these options if we can. So what is the wish of council? Do we feel like we're ready to choose an option? There's 2 proposals in front of us. They're what we asked staff to come up with. How do we feel about this? I see Councillor Digdon has his hand up.
Thank you very much. As a council, I know we all talked about it, and it's been up before us before. And I believe what we all wanted to do, I'm not sure, but that's what it sounded like at the meeting, is help as many people out as that we can. So I would make a proposal, or I'd like to make a motion that we accept proposal number 2 for the 2024 tax exemption.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder on that motion? Seconded by Councillor Donaldson. Councillor Tripp, any questions or comments on that? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. Next, we have E, Article C. So the next few are policies that we've had a chance to look at. We're going to go through each of them. We will have the opportunity for comments or questions, but we also have the ability to pass these tonight if we feel comfortable with them. So the first one we'll look at is Article C23, Phase 1 and 2, Wedgeport Sewer Policy. So there have been some changes made in the policy.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. Next one is Article C52, Phase 3, Wedgeport Sewer Policy. How does council feel about that one? Is there a seconder? I'll second. Moved and seconded. Any questions on that? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. Next, we have Article P2, Anti-Discrimination and Anti-Harassment Policy. That one had a fair amount of changes to it, and as I read this, I went down all the way to the bottom to see when it was written, and it was originally in 1988, because some of the language is like, wow, I can't believe you had to write that down, but they did. That wages had to actually be equal for men and women. Isn't that interesting? Thankfully, times have changed. How do we feel about this one?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions on that? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. And Article P7, Overtime Policy. So this one had a few quite significant changes as well. CAO, do you want to, or Deputy CAO, do you want to discuss this at all? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We didn't get a chance to look at this one at the last meeting, but we gave you the 7-day notice. So there's 2 major change in this policy. One of them we've been looking at in regards to overtime, because in the last few years, we've had a few of our staff, certainly in the operations side, that have accumulated overtime because of different reasons. One, storms, we have snow removals on weekends for, I think it was last year, it was happening every weekend, and the guys need to, follow policy and clear the snow. And 2, we have a lot of rainstorms that are impacting our sewer plants that need to be maintained during that time. It puts a lot of stress on it, so we have manpower to make sure that they continue working and they don't overflow and all those pieces. And then we have aging infrastructure that seems to break down every night or on the weekends. It's never really during work hours. So the accumulations of all those reasons have, certainly for the operation staff, have accumulated a lot of overtime. So one of the challenges is if you continue to accumulate overtime, then you need to provide time off. That's how we pay for overtime. That's how the policy is worded. So what we've done with this under, I think it's 4.4, the policy, basically what we're stating is that you can only accumulate up to 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, if you go past that, you will get paid out. So then at least it gives us opportunity to manage and control, to make sure that we have people working, and they're not always off because they put in the overtime. So now we're putting the option that we're paying that out after 2 weeks. That's how the policy is worded. When you look at this policy, we've done a number of changes too. A lot of it has to do with like clarification. When you have the opportunity to make changes, you're going to do some clarification. So if you look at the policy, there's a lot of new language there, but it's more about clarification and making it clearer how to, if employees are attending municipal, regional, organizational meetings, how is that handled? And we just put some other language around there. We've cleaned up some language. We've removed some language that was obsolete and didn't have to be there. But the second major change is around, I should say, not the major change, but we added some language on payout. So because if we're paying out folks after 2 weeks, we just needed language just to see to make sure that we'd follow policy to pay them out. So there was a language added there. But the other major change was for council meetings, we have two staff members that help us with council meeting, the IT folks, and our executive assistant helps us with meetings. The language in there was that they would get paid $75, and that was back in 2018, so it's been there for a while. We just felt that with, inflation and all the other stuff is going up, they deserved an increase in pay in there. So now their new language is that it would be $100 a meeting. These folks, even though, as you know, these meetings last for 2 hours, if not more, but there's actually more work than just what happens in these 2 hours, right? There's the agenda, there's posting it, there's making sure all the IT, that the links are working so that everybody, like in the presentations are all online, all those things. There's a lot of work that happens before the meetings too and after. So we just felt that it was a good opportunity to change that and to put an increase in there. And that's about it.
Okay. I have a question from Councillor Saunier.
Thank you. I agree with your changes, especially the 2-week proposal, and especially with the 4-day work week, because that's going to change a lot. Did you compare this model with other models? Just curious.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Sonia. I haven't, we didn't check it with with the municipal, like the town or the Yarmouth municipality, but I do know in my previous job, this was standard too, like there was a max of how much accumulated overtime that you could get, so it is nothing new to certain industries out there.
Okay. I'm prepared to make that motion.
Councillor Surratt?
Yes, I read the whole policy, was quite interesting to read. I always compare private and public sector, it's a lot different. But I tell you what, this is important. This is an important policy, and I can see, I see those guys plowing snow in the wintertime, at 6 in the morning, they're on the go, and I've sometimes wondered to myself, they must be getting overtime somewhere for that. Probably maybe, I don't know if it's a question or just a comment. it says budget, department head to budget for overtime pay. My God, that's gotta be a tough one for some, I mean, I was thinking that's depending, but I mean, you gotta try your best, and maybe past experience will give you an idea. How much snow you're gonna get this year, how do you budget for that, you don't know, but you get your best shot, but it's a good idea. At least it put something on paper that, by experience, it's, like I said, it's just a comment probably. Thank you.
I appreciate the comment, Councillor Surratt. It's definitely a challenge to budget, as you guys know. You guys are going through this now to kind of foresee what's going to happen. But it just lays out the language that it is the department heads that needs to oversee that and to make sure that it doesn't go way out of whack, I guess. That would be what the language is there for. So that,
Thank you.
Thank you. CEO Muse?
On the issue of over 2 weeks, so that would be, 70 hours, in excess of 70 hours. So under normal circumstances, that, like your regular stuff, like the plowing and stuff, would not result in overtime going that high. It's more around emergency repair, which we have seen quite a few times this year. I know, actually, Mr. Boudreau Kyle put out, shout out to his staff when the treatment plant at West Pumnico had a failure, and so those are the times where it's all hands on deck, and they are on deck, and I think some of this is almost, I won't say forcing, but it's almost acknowledging that, okay, you have done a service. Some of the staff, in my observation of this, is that they just see it as part of their job. They see it as part of their job. But at 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. or on the weekends, I don't know too many jobs that would be the definition, unless you're only working weekends. So it is a way to kind of capture that. And I will reiterate, it's 9 out of 10 times pre-approved. So it's not that LMUs can decide to go and put 40 hours of overtime on a whim. A supervisor of LMUs would have to authorize that to happen. So there is a control in place, but we will be monitoring this, because obviously with any policy, bad things can happen with good intentions. So thanks for the questions, and hopefully that clarifies things.
So we have a motion on the floor. Motion's been seconded. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. Next is...
Excuse me.
Yes, sorry, go ahead.
No, the only thing I was going to say before we had voted on it, but I think it's a great thing. And I feel as though this past week alone, I had some contact with one of our building inspectors, our fire inspector, our sewer people. And I honestly feel as though, and I've said it before, and I'll maintain saying that things keep going the way they are. A lot of our people go above and beyond what's actually expected of them sometimes. So I feel as though we have to be fair to them as well. So I think it's a great thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next one is minor amendments to the Wedgeport Wind Farm Development Agreement. We have 2 attachments. And from what I could see on this, we have a recommendation, but there was a PID that was added, just kind of to clean things up. Both attachments. The recommendation is, let me see here, oops. That council accept the addition of an additional property, PID 900931113, as party to the development agreement, as Elemental has an alternate plan for an access route to the development. Site plan alterations shall be to the mutual satisfaction of Elemental Energy and our development officer. I have a question from Councillor Saunier.
I'm ready to make that motion.
Okay. Motion is made and seconded. Any questions on that? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded, motion carried. Number 9, correspondence and for information. 9A, we have correspondence from Department of Public Works. There's an attachment, there's a letter. We had sent a letter and with 2 different requests. One of them is for the Wedgeport Crosswalk to be painted, and it will be done in spring. And the other one is for the Creamy Treat. That's the way I think of it, the Creamy Treat intersection. And the letter also went to the minister, so they're waiting for a response from the minister. Next, we have 9B, meeting with Juanita Spencer, NSFM. That is you, Deputy CAO.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I received, and I think the warden did also received an invitation for a meeting with Juanita Spencer, the Executive Director for NSFM. And it's not only an invitation for me and the warden, the invitation is out to all councils, so I'll just make sure that you receive a copy of it, but I just want to mention it here tonight.
Sounds good, thank you. And C, update on funding opportunities. So we have a list here of all the different funding opportunities that are out there, what we've requested, et cetera, et cetera. Any questions or comments on any of those pieces? All right. Next, number 10, we have financial requests. Did you have a question, Councillor Sonia?
I did.
Okay, go ahead.
So this funding is for capital projects, a lot of it, correct? And that has to do, obviously, it says so here, so sidewalks. So I guess the question is, we talked about the windmill money going into capital projects, which is only going to be in 2 or 3 years from now, the possibility of that anyhow. And that these funds here are here and now for these projects. They will come and go, am I correct? Some of these, but right now there's a significant amount of money out there, from 35 million to an additional 70 million, am I correct?
Councillor Saulnier, that is in reference to most likely the Municipal Capital Growth Program. The biggest funding opportunity that we have is there. That is a provincially sponsored grant program, brand new this year. It's going to happen, it's supposed to happen every year. There's supposed to be a grant program available. Because of the intake of the demand from municipalities, initially they went out at 30 million in December. They have upped that number to 100 million. So yes, you're correct. 70 million in additional infrastructure money has been injected in that program. That doesn't necessarily mean that our applications will be accepted any differently than what they had in mind before. But that would be one of many programs that we are currently either applying for or have applied and received money for.
So I guess to follow that up, if I may, the ongoing question is these funds, these grants, along with the windmill money, will that enhance or bring us closer to having our capital projects on priority list?
The quick answer is yes, because first of all, the funds that I've listed here are only third-party funds, so they wouldn't be internally generated. So any taxation revenue that we would receive are not included here in terms of, this is just simply to give you a status update of applications that we've made to either the province or federal government. It does not either include the community, coastal communities the gas tax fund. I always screw up the name. It does not include projects that we've committed under the gas tax fund. I've considered that kind of internal revenues. My hope is that this is my first cut at this, and that you would have a more regular update, almost like the department head updates, that you'd have like a regular update. Okay, here's what it was before, here's what it looks like now. The more money we get from a third party or anyone, the faster we can move a project. We're limited only by the staff and the ability to hire people to actually do the job. So in some cases, we have the money, but we can't find a bidder. So in some cases, so obviously if we can get the money, we're gonna move this stuff as quickly as possible. The last thing I'd say about this is there are most of the studies that are in here, like Connect 2 program, and there's another one, there's others, there's more than one. They set you up for success. So typically, there are funding models for active transportation or wastewater or other things, but you have to have the project to get it funded. And to have the project, you need to plan the project. So 2 applications that are outstanding in here right now are to Connect to funding, and those are for studies for 2 multi-purpose trails. They would be the 1 and 2 in the active transportation plan, one for Plymouth, one for Tuscot. I have no idea which one the province will accept. They may accept none, one, or both. Whichever one that's going to be accepted is going to be the one we're going to execute. And we're also going to look at other funding modules to see if we have room in other places. So basically what we do, I mean, this is kind of a long answer to your question, but basically what we do is we got a list of like 30 things, and the money comes in, and we say, where does it fit on these 30 things? And so if it's number 1 on the list, and we got money for it, that's the one. So oftentimes, what would happen is, like, as recently as, I don't know, a couple months ago, when we did the application for the Municipal Capital Grant Fund, I remember, if you remember, I brought 2 projects to bear. One was the Tuscot Treatment Plant expansion, and the other was the East Pubnico tank restoration. And so you had made the approval. So what we did was, we got you to the promised land. We said, okay, here are the projects. These 2 are the ones that fit the best. What do you think? And so we're recommending we apply for both. You agreed. You made an approval, and that becomes part of the application. Council says this is 1, 2, right? So we do bring these things to you. It's just not as obvious as what we want it to be, which is to say, every time we have money that comes up, you all know which project it is, right? Because you've got the list, and you've worked the list just as much as staff has. So we're trying to get to that place. We're trying to be more proactive. So this is part of that process.
If I may, Madam Chair. Thank you for that, Alain. As you know, we were asked, or I was asked to ask our multi-trail or multi-use trail committee to write a letter of support. So you can imagine it does create a stir in our community because it's a step forward towards sidewalks or multi-use trail, to be honest with you. So I just want to make you aware that our community is excited over this, and they're hoping we're going to be a little closer to having what they've been wanting for, I guess, the last 40 years. So I've read that report that came on from NSFM, and what got me a little excited too, in the end there, in closing, it says, if you can't find a grant that suits your municipality needs, to reach out to this Lucy McLeod. That's quite interesting. In other words, what she's stating here, if you don't specifically have it, there's money out there for it, or she seems to say she'll help. It's something I've never seen before. Mind you, I haven't been here for a long time, but yeah. Anyhow, thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to financial request. Number 10, 10A, WSP invoice for approval. So there is an attachment. Deputy CAO, if you wanted to speak on this, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you can see, there's an attachment of an invoice here on the agenda. And the reason why I bring that up is that I'm looking for approval from council to pay this particular invoice. And just to bring you're asking the question why. Currently, we are over budget for the budget line for WSP. And we are probably $6,000 over, and then we have this $9,000 invoice. And I just wanted to kind of go through it where, you know, we've talked about budget today and how sometimes it's difficult to figure out what the right amount is for WSP and how much we're going to need them for the following year. So you're kind of predicting the future, and we've gone through that in this tonight. But I just want to share with you, like, the work that WSP has done for us for the last year. So that kind of reminds you why we are where we are right now and why we're asking for this. But like in April, it started that we did a DA at the East Camp Sawmill, if you remember that. Then we went to a DA at the Lower Argyle, the old school in Lower Argyle. Then we went to the Grandpa's Oyster, which is the one on Roberts Island. So there was a DA there. We did a change of zoning at 40 Abbott's Harbor Road in Pumnico. Then we did a lot of housekeeping. If you remember, we had some housekeeping that we had done. And then, obviously, we remember the Westport Wind Farm that we asked WSP to help us out and walk us through that whole process. And then, just more recently, we have the Tuscan drive-through that's happening. So those are 7 major issues that WSP has worked for us in regards to creating a DA. And all these, require their assistance on, they do a lot of work in the background, but they do help us for the PAC meeting, the public hearing, the first reading, all these things for all these items that I brought up. And I just wanted to share that with council, just because we are over budget, but here's the reason why. And that's why I'm bringing it to council tonight for just to get approval, I guess, to pay this bill.
Thank you. Councillor Surratt?
I am so surprised to see that we have a bill and we have to approve, and you've explained it. I was saying to myself, well, the CAO has the right for $10,000, and I was trying to say to myself, why is this coming here? Now I understand. I was, it makes so much sense. And I should know go to that budget quite fine. Usually, there's a budget line there for a certain amount. So hard to predict. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's great. And I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Just on the motion very quickly, it looks like you're approving an invoice, but what you're actually approving is to spend money over budget. So you're right, I can approve an invoice usually up to 10,000, provided that it's within budget. I typically, if, this one came a little late because we had 2 bills that came rather quickly towards the end of the year, and we probably could have gone before for the last one, but we had another line in planning that was underutilized. So it's still, when you looked at them both, they're kind of like close, but this one would really put it over. So thanks for explaining that, Deputy.
That was
And
great.
You're right. I just, except when it goes that far over, I don't like to do it on my own.
Perfect.
So we have a motion on the floor. Any other questions on that one? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. Next, we have a district community grant request for Abrams River Schoolhouse Society. That is,
I'll move that we give 500.
go ahead.
I'll move that we give $500 to the Abrams River Schoolhouse Society.
Do you have a seconder? Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded, motion carried. Then we have, the last one is Western Counties Regional Library funding request. So we have 2 attachments. There is a one-time funding request for $3,200, and they're looking for a letter of support from us as well for their board, because they're trying to negotiate a better funding model. They're consistently struggling and needing more money. So we have a suggested motion. What is the wish of council?
So moved.
Do we have a seconder? Questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded, motion carried. Number 11, agenda topics for next meeting or notice of motion by councillors.
I noted the motion of Councillor Saulnier was almost like a notice of motion. I'm just noting it again to make sure that council understands that we'll be bringing you a draft capital policy in the future.
Yep. Question period? Anything out there? Councillor Surratt? Yep. Go ahead, Councillor Surratt.
Thank you. I had a question, but you didn't pick it up.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. Phase 3 of the Westport sewer. I saw that the first one was $500, phase one and two, phase three, $702. And I do realize that's probably, the project was more expensive this time. I guess my question is there, and I've been asked this, will there be a phase four? Does anybody, do you, Alain or Gordon? Because there was not as many, excuse me, Alain.
Yeah, my quick answer would be no, unless there's another funding model that would look for this. So, we've done 42 plus 28, I think. We may have done a little bit more than that. It would not be a complete list of all of the properties identified by CBCL back in 2000 and whatever. There would still be some that may require replacement. This is a really good chunk of it.
Yeah.
I'd say that the project won't happen the same way that it happened the last couple of times, because the way that, when we do it, it's more expensive than if other people do it on their own. And I think because of what it is, we have to revisit how we engineer these things. So, as it's the case, oftentimes somebody's going to give you an engineered design. Engineers will err on the side of design, and some of your local contractors might have cheaper ways to do certain things. They're both right. Like in some cases, you have to do that. In some cases, the contractor is correct. We got to, hit it a different way. So it's not going to be the same way. We might get funding again, but without funding, I would not recommend we do it, because it's too expensive to everyone involved. We had 73% funding support from the governments on this one. I think it was 66% in the first phase. The cost has exploded, which is why the phase three people paid $700 or $800 more for their portion compared to the first time.
When the question the person was asking me, I probably should have called Gordon, but they said, well, wasn't there 44 or 45 on that last phase, but you only took 28 because of the cost?
Yes.
So what happens to whatever happened to the others?
So.
Unless there's a model.
Great question. I mean, for us, we know who they are. They
Yes.
remain on a list, but we're not pursuing another phase at this
Yeah.
time because
Okay.
there's no funding mechanism for
To
it.
do it.
But if one comes out, then
Yeah.
we may revisit that. But we would, at this point, we'd have to compare it to other projects and make sure that the priority project would be selected. Wedgeport has been reasonably successful. Sometimes people sign up and then, but they're not like, I think we kind of had to push some, because we're coming to the point where, and this is respecting Wedgeport, right? So we're coming to the point where some people would like to see that for their system, and then there's people that desperately need it for their system, but they're not necessarily coming up because they have to pay a portion themselves as well. So we have to find maybe a better way. If we're going to do this again, we can't do it the same way. Hopefully that answers the question.
No, it does, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have in camera. We have two things. Okay, all those in favor? Did we have a seconder on that? Okay. Who's going to second that? Who will second that?